Hello and welcome to this episode. And in this episode, we will be discussing about some basic operations in Python. These basic operations include addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And we will see how much time we will have left, and then we can discuss maybe a few more uh, operations in Python. So let's get started. First, I would like you to recall from the previous episode that we were storing data using variables, right? So variables were being used to store data. Now, how do we store data in a variable? That is, we create the name of the variable, let's say a, and then we assign a value to that variable, 10. Now that is a, and it has a value of 10. Another variable, we will call it b, and we assign a value of 20 to this variable. Now you can see that both of these variables are integers. Okay, this is an integer, and also the other one is also an integer. Now let's see what happens when you are doing some operations on integers. Basically, when integers are the operand of an operation, what would be the result? That's very important to know. Let's see. Let's print a plus b. What do you think the result of this operation would be? A plus b. Let's have a look. Now I'm going to run the code. As you can see, a plus b. Okay, I haven't saved. I'm sorry, I forgot to save. Save and then run. And a plus b results into 30. 10 plus 20 is 30, right? Now, the same way, if I say a minus b or print a times b, all of these would result into integers. Let's run it. And as you can see, okay, I didn't save again. I'm sorry. I keep forgetting to save. Let's run. As you can see, a plus b is 30, a minus b is minus 10, and a times b is 200. Okay, so since the operands were integers, the result is also an integer. Integer in this case, integer in this case, and also integer in this case. Now, these three operations, the addition, subtraction, and multiplication, are basically following this rule. As long as you have both of these operands or all of the operands included or involved in the operation, if they're integer, the result is going to be integer. Now, if we change any of these operands, A or B, to a float, the result will always become a float. Let's say 20.0. I make one of them float. Now this is a float. It's not an integer anymore. We will see what would be the result. Let's run. As you can see, the result of all of these operations became float. 30.0 minus 10.0 and 200.0. So all of these changed to float. Right, so that's how it works for these three operations: addition, subtraction, and multiplication. All right. Now division is a bit different. It will act in a different way. Let's see what happens if we have a division. Okay, so now let's going to talk about division, and division is going to be a bit different from those three other operations. So let's define an A. A is going to be probably 20, B is going to be 10, and C is going to be 5.0. So two integers. This is an integer. Let's say this is an int, this is an int, and obviously this is a float. Now let's see how this division works. All right, so let's say if we print a divided by b, and we print a divided by c. I put 2 in here, not B, so I should write B. All right, so 20 divided by 10, both as integers. What would be the result of this? And 20 divided by 5.0, what would be the result of this? Let's see. As you might expect that because these two are both integers, you might expect that the result for this operation might be an integer and the result for this one might be a float because a float is involved. C is a float. But let's see what happens. Let's run. Sorry, I forgot to save. That's my mistake. All right, let's see. As you can see, division always yields a float result. So even though we have A and B as integers in this situation, the result will always be float. But this is called the float division. So basically, when you use 1/1/, which is basically this one, this is called the float division. Float division. That means that it will always result in floats. But we also have a different type of a division in Python that is going to be using 2 slashes. So let's see, A, 2 slashes, and B, and then print A and 2 slashes and C. Let's see what would be the result of these two operations. So A and B is integer, both. You can say A integer, B integer, and A integer, B float. So let's see what happens when you have this operation. This is also division, but it's a bit of a different division. Let's run it. Let's save it first and then run it. And as you can see, this division with 2 slashes, which is called a floor division. So it has 2 backslashes. As you can see, just like this, this results, this is called floor division. And as you can see, when you have two integers involved, it returns the result as integer. But if you have a float involved, it will still result into a float. And why do we call this floor division? Because it will always give you the floor of the decimal number. That means that it will give you 2. If you have 2.9, it will still give you 2. And if you have 2.1, it will still give you 2. And that's why it's called a floor division. It will always go to the floor of this number, okay? 2.9 will result into 2, and 2.1 will result into 2. It will not round the number, so you have to be very careful. We are not rounding the numbers in here, anything like that, okay? We're just simply returning an integer. Python is just simply returning an integer. Okay, so this was a bit about division and how it's different from the 3 other operations that we have. And we said that we have 2 types of a division: float division, which basically always results into a float result, and the floor division, which if you have integers, it will give you an integer, and if you have any of the operands as float involved, it will give you a float.